Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another great episode of the Club Eisenhower podcast. This is your host, Todd Arrington, and I am, as always, the director of the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum in beautiful Abilene, Kansas. If you haven't been here to visit us yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. We're fantastic. You should come see us. We are now actually Newsweek's #1 top presidential attraction in the country. And that was based on the Newsweek Reader's Choice Awards this year. So readers of Newsweek voted and voted us the #1 presidential attraction in the land right now. So we look forward to holding that title for a year, and then we look forward to winning it again next year too. So there's no shortage of confidence here at the Eisenhower Presidential Library, obviously. So really, though, thanks to everyone who voted, and we're really honored and thrilled to be the Reader's Choice Award winner for 2025. I'm very happy to come back to the Club Eisenhower podcast today. Our topic today is going to be veterans and sort of their role in history, and we'll get a little bit into some specific things about veterans in Kansas because, of course, that's where we're located. But, you know, we'll talk generally about veterans and their contributions to history as well. And I'm very pleased to have as our guest today Dr. Robert Smith, who is the former director of the museum complex at Fort Riley, Kansas, which is only about 30 minutes down the road from us here in Abilene. Junction City is where you'll find Fort Riley. So, Bob, welcome to the Club Eisenhower podcast, and feel free to tell us a little bit about who you are, what your background is, and how you came to be working as the director of the Fort Riley Museums.
Well, thank you for having me, Todd. Just a little bit. I am a native Nebraskan, which probably, here I'm in the middle of Wildcat and Jayhawk territory that always had to explain myself to anyone that I had talked to and asking about my background. I am a military brat. I have never served in the service, but my dad was a senior NCO. He's a World War II vet, served in the Navy, and then at the end of the Second World War, transferred over to the Air Force. And he was a senior NCO, and many times my work at Fort Riley, they always asked me, did I serve? And I said, yes, but let me give you a caveat on that. My dad ran the household like he was running his office at SAC Strategic Air Command at Omaha. So I think I have a little bit of service under my belt. But I was a non-traditional graduate student at Kansas State University, received my doctorate in 2008, and was recruited by the Fort Riley Museums to work at the museum. And I worked under a previous director for a couple of years. And then when he retired, I was promoted up to the directorship. I was also, I believe, for the United States Army, a guinea pig in that our museum was the first museum to be extensively remodeled in the Army museum system. So I learned a lot of construction in the time, the ins and outs, Army contracting, etc. So, for 10 years, we at the museum, my staff and I, we put together 2 brand new museums. Tore them down to the bare walls and started it anew. And we're very proud of our accomplishments there. And yes, I know this will come up, but yes, we are open, and we fully intend to stay open.
Well, that's great news. First of all, thank you for clarifying that. And I know that, you know, in our previous conversations, we talked about the fact that we both have Nebraska connections. I think I recall you said you went to University of Nebraska as an undergraduate. Oh, yes. Is that right?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay. And
yes.
And I went to graduate school at the University of Nebraska. I lived there for 10 years in a previous career, previous life, I guess you would say, with the National Park Service. So I do know Nebraska very well. And actually, I love Nebraska and I love Nebraskans. So was just kidding earlier about, we don't blame you for being a Nebraskan here in Kansas. I'm an adopted Kansan now too, so it's okay. And then I want to clarify, Bob, you said you are technically retired, but you're still kind of involved with the museums.
I'm filling in on a volunteer basis. And also I have very close ties to my headquarters, the Center of Military History yet. And they're asking me to take care of a couple of small jobs at the museum that need to be done and that I'm acquainted with. So I'm the unpaid volunteer, but I'm happy to do it for the museums.
It's always fun to be doing a job that you used to get paid for and now you're doing as a volunteer, isn't it? It's
really good. One of the great joys of working at the museum and that I do miss is meeting with the different tour groups and having that interaction with the folks that come through, not only veterans, but also serving military from all over the world that have come through the museum. So I have a great time. I look forward to doing those tours.
Yeah, you've said a couple of things here that really strike a chord with me, Bob. And that's, first of all, when you work in a museum, how much other stuff you have to do and that you learn that is not what people generally think of when you tell them you work in a museum, like construction or like, planning exhibits and things like that. It's a lot more than just showing up every day and being able to talk to people about all the great stuff you have in your museum. And I feel the same way that you do in terms of, being a director here at the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum, that, you spend so much time on calls and meetings and talking about budgets and all this other stuff that you really do you really have to make an effort to stay connected to the history and to the museum side of things and being able to interact with the public. So I know when I get to talk to groups and things, that's the stuff I really, really love to do, and to talk to people and share the history. And you don't get as many chances for that as you would like when you're directing a museum, do you?
That's correct. The day-to-day, the paperwork, all of that, I know it's necessary, but when those tour groups come through the door, I always called that my dessert because I could interact with them. But the design of the museum, working with the contractors and on construction issues, things like that. It was quite a learning experience to do that. But at the end of the day, I think we actually accomplished our mission there and putting two first-class museums. And we always looked over our shoulder at Eisenhower because you were going through a remodel at the same time.
That's right. Yeah, that's true. The museum here was just redone and completed in 2019, and then was open for 6 or 8 months. And then, of course, COVID hit and everything closed for a while. So let me ask you this, Bob. So you're saying that the Fort Riley museums are open and people can visit. Is there any kind of security procedure that people need to follow to get onto Fort Riley, because it is an active duty military base?
Yes, there is. It's very simple, though. We tell visitors to arrive at the Visitors Control Center, which is right off I-70 at the Marshall Field Gate. They go in there, and all you need is your driver's license. They do a quick background check. Takes about 5 minutes, and they give you a pass, and then you can come in and visit the museums. And we are located on what we always like to refer to as the historic main post. That's the when Fort Riley first started in 1853. That's where it started, right there and we're right off the historic cavalry parade field. So very easy to get on post.
Excellent. Well, that's good. Let me ask you this too. We hear all the time about the names of military bases and who they're named for. I honestly have no idea. Can you tell me who Fort Riley is named for? Because I honestly don't know.
Oh, absolutely. It's named after Bennett Riley. And Bennett Riley began his career as well, he began his life as a shoemaker, but I don't know how good of a shoemaker he was, because very shortly afterwards he joined the United States Army as during the War of 1812 as an ensign, a rank that we no longer have in the military, which is below that of a second lieutenant. So he's at the very bottom of the officer's commission. But he decided to make it his life. He was very instrumental in helping to organize and equip and also convoy merchants from Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, down to Santa Fe, New Mexico. Served in the Seminole Wars down in Florida, and then was a general officer for the Mexican-American Wars in 1845, 46, and 47. And then, on top of it all, he served as the first territorial governor of the territory of Kansas before its statehood, and helped write that state's constitution. The United States Army decided by 1853 they wanted to honor his long career in the military, and they named the new post, which was initially called Camp Center, which they believed was the geographical center of the United States. And their math is about as good as mine, because they're about 80 miles off. And but the interesting thing about Bennett Riley is when Congress decided to name the new post after him, he had passed away just 2 weeks prior to that time. And so we do have in the museum one of two original portraits of Bennett Riley and a couple of the artifacts that he has provenanced.
Oh, excellent. Okay. So, well, thank you. I learned something today. And Bob, refresh my memory, but I think Fort Riley is one of the oldest posts west of is it the Mississippi or the Missouri? I know it's one of the oldest posts somewhere, but I don't quite remember all of my geography very well here.
The west of the Missouri. It was actually at the end of the military road from what they called the military road from Fort Riley or for Fort Leavenworth to Fort Riley. And so in 1853, that was the edge of the frontier, though, for the post. Anything west was a wide open territory.
Okay, great. And so okay. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because again, I wasn't sure who Fort Riley was named for, so I learned something today. So I appreciate that. So Bob, tell us a little bit about how did you first get interested in military history? You talked about your dad being in the Navy and then also in the Air Force. Is that kind of where your interest came from, or were there other things that got you interested in studying military history?
You know, Todd, as far as I can remember, I was always interested in history, military history, especially. I grew up right around the time of as a very small child, the Civil War centennial. And I would, in third grade and fourth grade, I'd find everything I could read on the Civil War, the American Revolution. And I can remember having, interest in that. And there was a series of books that I would read geared for, my age group. They were called Landmark publications by Random House. And they did one on Dwight Eisenhower, and they did one on D-Day, did one on the American Revolution. And I gobbled those up. I don't know the interest. Now, I was very much acquainted with the military, with my dad being in the service, and also moving around the country, because when you're a military brat, you see a lot of the country with your folks' postings and things. And so, but as I aged, I knew military history would be the interesting thing. And I credit my wife by telling me, I said I was a non-traditional student. She said, "You're always reading history. Why don't you do something about it?" and so I decided much later in life to go back to graduate school. I had a very, very fine bunch of faculty that were on my both my master's and my PhD committees and they encouraged military history. And I'm going to put the shout out here for Kansas State University in that they had, when I went to school there in the 90s, and haven't kept up, but had a lot of fine military historians there that I could work with. And I guess my learning about, and then I kind of grafted away from the American area and became interested in British history. And my major professor was also a British historian. And so the interesting thing is I always got, it got me a lot of trips over to Great Britain. And so I got to see the world there and work in the British archives. So I guess, it was, I don't know if it was by osmosis or whatever that kind of was grafted into me and being a military historian. But I always enjoyed working at the museum and also working as a graduate student and working with different military officers that I had met. And I know it's cliche, but I would have to say, Todd, that the rest is history.
That's a perfect answer for a historian. I agree. And I'll agree with you too in that Kansas State University has a great military history program, and we work with them here at the Eisenhower Presidential Library. We do some stuff with them, and actually, you may find this interesting. In early November here in this year, 2025, we are kind of co-sponsoring, I guess you would say, the Flint Hills Military History Symposium that is run through Kansas State University. So, and in fact, we'll have a day here on our campus where we do sessions here, and we have a little reception that evening for everybody who's attending. So there's something to put on your calendar if you want, Bob. You can come back and see us again as part of the Flint Hills Military History Symposium in early November this year.
Love to do it. Have a long relationship with the Eisenhower. You're know Todd and Jeff from way back when. I'm kind of telling tales about them being, they've been around a long time. If I've been, I know that. But, I'd be very, very happy. And I'm planning on attending some of the sessions there.
Excellent. Great. Well, I hope we'll see you here. So when we were talking the other day, I want to ask you, you mentioned these Random House books that you read as a younger person that sort of got you interested in history. As you progressed in your academics and your work as a military historian, are there any books or films or documentaries or anything like that you view as kind of instrumental to your development and your interests as a military historian? And what made me think of this was the conversation we had before about the John Keegan book. When you mentioned that the other day. So I'm just curious, are there any really sort of monumental books in your experience or films, documentaries, anything that kind of led you down this path?
Well, I could say that a lot of films. My father, after he retired, was in the movie business, and he, as growing up as a teenager, we had theaters, and I'd watch all the historical movies. And I can always remember, movies like The Longest Day as being, instrumental. And I can also remember watching, and as a historian now, it's not the most historically accurate and pretty bad movie, but The Blue Max. And when I was in high school at that time, then I read everything I could on British and French and German aviators in World War I, and was just fascinated with that. And so kind of my tastes have in historical areas have changed around a bit, but stayed locally in the military history areas. But I can think of a series of books. John Keegan's Face of Battle was very instrumental. A book, one of the other books that was kind of instrumental in getting back into history and things was McNeil's Plagues and Peoples. I was always interested in disease and how it impacted history. And it's, I guess, kind of a macabre thought, but war and disease always spiked my interest in how history, how it was on the trajectory of history. But oh golly, read all kinds of books, and remember reading from cover to cover the American Heritage magazines and their books. The American Heritage History of the Civil War, American Heritage World War I, and a number of those publications. So I was in high school a reader, read everything I could get my hands on. I lived in a smaller town, but it had a very nice library, and read everything I could on military history. So I don't know if it was osmosis or what, but I would always gravitate towards the military history. And as a small child, I'd have my little green army men, and I would, I'd look, read about something in World War I, and I'd go up and dig up the backyard, a trench system to put them in, and things like that. So I guess I was always kind of very nerdy about that.
I had the Green Army Men too, so I remember that very well. And I'll tell you, I have talked to a number of people who are both professional historians and people who just have a deep interest in history, even if that's not their profession. And I cannot tell you how many people bring up that American Heritage History of the Civil War collection that were written for younger people, and I had that too, and I read that a lot. But you're also inspiring me here in a little bit, in that I know I have a copy of Keegan's The Face of Battle at home that I haven't read yet. So in talking to you is inspiring me to go home and pick that book up tonight. So I've got to get caught up on that one.
Well, he inspired the whole social history, looking at the lives of the ordinary soldier. And as I had mentioned in my my talk on Thursday, that this has created a whole new area of history that historians are looking at. And I think that their stories and those veteran stories are so applicable to the face of war, what soldiers endured, is so important to the historical records and the historical facts.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The rise of the social history movement in the 60s and 70s really changed just about every field of history, and military history no exception. So, but yes, thank you. I'm going to go dig into John Keegan tonight, so I'm looking forward to that. Let's talk a little bit about some of your experience, when you were at Fort Riley. Did you deal with museum artifact collections? Did you deal with archival document collections? Did you deal with all of that, or were you more on one side or the other?
All of that. The museum collection, in which we are actually sending our artifacts out. We had around 13,000 in just the cavalry collection artifacts. Wow. And another 3,000 in the 1st Infantry Division. So I had 2 museums under my my control. We also had an extensive, and we still have an extensive archives with some really, really interesting things. It's amazing, and you probably know this too, with your collection and things. You can't keep track of everything, even though it's on a database. But you're going through a cabinet and you go, oh, that's so neat. I mean, that is really cool, that artifact. I hadn't realized we had one like that. And and nerding out here as a museum person, to be able to put those gloves on and touch something that George Patton touched, or we have one Custer artifact, Custer, to touch those. And, it's that connection to history. It's kind of like that connection I think we history nerds can fully appreciate. If I may, we had one, when we were doing the museum design, we had a artifact that it said a rain hat 1860s, circa 1860s, and it was very, very, very fragile, and we really did not want to handle it a lot, but we decided, well, this would be great for an exhibit we call the U.S. Cavalry Out Here on the Plains, 40 miles on beans and hay. And we started to look at it very closely. And one day we peeked inside the to get it ready for its mount, and noticed it had a signature. And it was really cool. It was George A. Custer, 1868.
Wow.
And so we thought, we knew we had something from the that 1860s period, but we weren't sure that it belonged to Custer. And here we had verification. And it was something like, and then the decision was made with my staff. And I said, we've got to put this on exhibit. And everybody, it was a unanimous choice, oh, yes, we do. But, the little things like, Patton did not have, we have a pair of his boots, but Patton did not have a large foot size. I mean, I think he was around an 8.5.
Oh, wow.
And so it's those little things that we really geek out on.
Oh, absolutely. And when you mentioned Custer, of course, I started to listen because when I was still working for the National Park Service, I spent just 2 months in really just a sort of a caretaker role as the acting superintendent at Little Bighorn. And so when you said Custer, my ears kind of, pricked up there a little bit, that, knowing obviously what happened to Custer at Little Bighorn. So, and actually, but that was a great segue, Bob, into the next question I wanted to ask you, which was just, do you have any favorites? I mean, I'm sure, you love everything that you've worked with there. But do you have, besides, the Custer artifact you just mentioned and the boots from George Patton, are there things that you have in the collections at Fort Riley, be they documents or three-dimensional artifacts, that are personal favorites of yours, just things that you always come back to in your mind at, wow, this is such a neat thing to have. And this is one of the reasons I really love this work. Do you have any favorites besides the ones you've already mentioned?
Oh, I have so many favorites there that when I walk through the museum, we need to put this on. We have one of my favorites is a weapon, which is a Hotchkiss machine gun. And it's not exactly, I'm not, I understand and can feel very comfortable around talking to soldiers about different weaponry and things like that. But we have a Hotchkiss machine gun, but there is a brass plate on it. And it was captured in Columbus, New Mexico in 1916 from Pancho Villa's people when they came across and started the big with Pershing and the punitive expedition. And I think, well, that's kind of neat that's, we can tie that not only to a historical event, but this is something that was the impetus for the punitive expedition in 1916, 1917. So I do have, that's one of my favorite pieces there. We also have, I like Teddy Roosevelt for some reason.
Sure.
We always used to, in graduate school, in one of my classes, before we got started, we'd have a little kind of roundtable discussion about who you'd like to have dinner with. And I'd always said, there's two people that I would love to have dinner with, and that was Ulysses S. Grant and Teddy Roosevelt. But we have...
Don't forget Dwight Eisenhower.
Oh, I forgot. Oh, Eisenhower, absolutely. Oh.
Just kidding. You don't really have to say that. It's okay. Well, it's funny that you said Theodore Roosevelt.
How could I forget Eisenhower?
Yes, of course.
By all means.
It's funny you said Theodore Roosevelt because the most recent historian rankings of presidential greatness Theodore Roosevelt is number 4 and Dwight Eisenhower is number 5. And so, we've been kind of saying here internally, hey, we think we can take Teddy. We're going to try to get Ike up to number 4. But anyway, so not sure that'll ever really happen, but we're sure going to try.
You're going to have a tough fight there with
I know.
Teddy, he might come back to haunt you with his big stick there to
That's right.
But you had mentioned, and if I could just go back,
sure.
The Little Bighorn. I had an incredible experience working with the Army. The Army had given me opportunities to travel the country, but at the Little Bighorn, I was one of the folks chosen to ride on horseback the battlefield with the Crow Indians.
Oh, wow.
And it was really an experience. I mean, we went off of the grounds of the Park Service onto some of their area that they own, and it was an interesting experience. And as a historian, I'm not a big Custer fan, and I'm going to probably get hate mail for that.
No, it's okay.
But I could understand why he did what he did by sitting on the back of a horse and riding that area. So it was an incredible, I must say, Todd, it was an incredible experience. Although the other thing is riding 8 miles and not being a horse person. It was also, there was some pain involved with that experience.
I can imagine. Probably a little sore that night.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, yeah, that's great. And that whole site is sort of surrounded by the Crow Reservation. So I enjoyed that aspect of working with those folks when I was there as well. So anyway, very interesting. So in terms of veterans specifically here in Kansas, I mean, obviously Kansas has some very famous veterans. You've got, of course, Dwight Eisenhower, he's the most famous of all, I would say. Bob Dole, for example, was very famously a World War II vet who'd been wounded in Italy. Are there other sort of Kansas specific veterans that you're aware of that maybe have really interesting stories, but aren't necessarily as well known as like an Eisenhower or a Dole or somebody like that?
Well, one of my favorite veterans is, and he's still with us today, World War II veteran, here in Manhattan, Kansas, Jim Sharp. And Jim Sharp has a fabulous history. I mean, he witnessed history, and he went into the Army and arrived just in time for the Battle of the Bulge and served with the 1st Infantry Division in the Battle of the Bulge. But what's more interesting is that, at the end of World War II, a number of soldiers that had been inducted just prior to the end of the war did not have enough points to come home. And so he, with the 18th Infantry Division, served as a guard at Nuremberg.
Oh, my gosh.
And he actually guarded all of the major Nazi war criminals. And his stories are just incredible. About his interaction. He said many times, we weren't supposed to talk to them, but eventually, there would be some discussions and things. They got to know the war criminals, and his stories are just amazing. And we at the museum went to see him and brought him out to the museum many times to interview him and get his veteran story. So, local. We have a local treasure here in the area that, and I would say a historical treasure in his story. So he would remain at the top of my list, right below Eisenhower now. So
there you go. Good answer. Well, but you mentioned something there too that's really important, I think, and that is this idea of talking to people like this and interviewing them and. Do you have recommendations about how veterans can or should document their experiences? Do they write them down? Do they record an oral history? What about photos? How do you, like, as somebody who's been a director of a museum, what kinds of things do you want to see when you have, say, a veteran's family who wants to give you something? What's the best way for people to document their stories and their experiences while serving in the military?
Well, the best way is, either sitting and now that I'm no longer the director, but we did have an oral history project going on while I was director. It's kind of in limbo now, but oral histories are so important, and to have those transcribed. Photographs. We have, you reminded me of one gentleman we have who served in the Second World War. He was from Lawrence, Kansas, and he took his camera to war with him, his personal camera, and he documented that. And when right before he retired, he turned over to the museum both his notebooks of his day-to-day going through Europe, and also his photographs. And his photographs are just an interesting chronology of him crossing Europe in 1944-45. And it's the Todd, it's the little things too. It's not the big battles, but it's the day-to-day life that seems to interest me, but I think also tie into what we had talked about earlier, that social history.
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of that, again, as you say, the day-to-day, what is a regular day like? And I think certainly veterans who serve during times of war, tend to get a lot more, attention, or there's more interest just because they have that experience with being involved in an actual conflict. But what about vets who maybe served exclusively in during peacetime? Are their stories less interesting or any less important?
No, not really. No, during peacetime, some great events have happened inside the United States military. 1947, between World War II and the Korean War, when my dad went into the Air Force, that was a time of a brand new branch of the service coming in and having, the issue of Strategic Air Command, and seeing those, being a kid off at Air Force Base in Omaha, and seeing the B-52s and the tankers there. Those were really, really important milestones in the military. And I would offer, the 1950s for the United States Army. That was a time of experimentation and things, creating weapons, which we kind of scratch our head now. The Davy Crockett, which was a Jeep portable nuclear weapon. That was,
wow.
Yeah. Well, and that goes in with Eisenhower's, nuclear deterrence there. You can't put many hundreds of thousands of men on the, looking at the Soviets in Eastern Europe. So how do you match their force size? Well, you put nuclear weapons out there. And the Davy Crockett was an invention of the time. The only thing, and I've talked to soldiers, through the museum that have actually been on cruise, so that they basically tell me, well, the blast range, once we fired the Davy Crockett, the blast range would take us out too. So, so I think it's now listed as one of the 10 worst weapons the United States military ever invented. But it's
quite a distinction there.
And those are during peacetime, and they're so important to the historian that covers the Cold War history, which today now is almost ancient history for a lot of our even our college students today.
Oh,
you say Soviet Union and they look,
Yeah, I am old enough to remember, the 1980s and the sort of the tail end of the Cold War, and some of the saber rattling by President Reagan. And then, in his second term, when he was much more willing to negotiate after the rise of Gorbachev. And so there's a lot of great stories there, I think, from people who were serving during that period when, the Cold War mindset had been so strong for so long. And now suddenly things are starting to change a little bit. And then a few years later, the Soviet Union collapses, and suddenly the U.S. military has to sort of pivot towards not being geared toward, a potential conflict with the Soviets to what's the next conflict. And of course, then it comes to Desert Storm and things like that. So yeah, I agree. I think the vets who serve in peacetime probably have some stories that are probably almost as interesting or just as interesting as those who served during wartime.
And I think, and as I would be in full agreement with you, there's so much value in those stories too.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you were working with the Fort Riley Museums, Bob, did you give veterans advice about sort of how to preserve their papers and what's the best way? Like, what do you do with something like medical records or a DD-214 or something like that? That record of service and discharge. What about medals? You put them in a shadow box, or do what do you do with them? Did you guys accept those kinds of things as donations, or did you offer any kind of guidance to veterans about how to care for those things so that they do last a long time?
We offered guidance because the Army has in its collection, the Army Museum System has over 500,000 items in the collection. Wow. And so we were told by our that, if the item that came in was something from a known personality or a particular event, our advice to the vets that came in would say, your family. Preserve this for your family, turn it over to them, turn over your DD-214, turn over records. Any diaries and things were very, very important, especially during wartime, that we would actually want to accession those into our archive collection. But a lot of the artifacts that came, we were pretty much told that the Army has quite a few. Oh, this is going to hurt you, but when I say this, but the Army has many hundreds of Ike jackets.
Oh, yeah.
So sure. Only if it was worn by Dwight D. Eisenhower or Patton or any of those folks. Please keep it safe. We would recommend, if we couldn't take it, we would recommend to other museums that would be interested in it. So we wanted to keep the information, the artifacts alive, and not end up in a trash can, which would be just unforgivable.
Yeah, and you make a great point here too, Bob, that I think people maybe who don't work in this field don't know quite as well, which is that museums would love to take everything that people offer them, but it's just not realistic in terms of how much space we have or don't have really to store things. And so we do have to be really selective about what can we accept. But yeah, we try to do something similar here at the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum, where if people offer us something and we just cannot take it, we do try to say, hey, you might try this place or that place or something like that. So we try to do something similar here, where we, even if we can't take it, we try to be helpful and at least give them some additional ideas about where they might go with it.
Well, and what I think people don't realize that you and I are very well aware of is, the amount of time in curating and conserving these items, because especially as these textiles, they don't last forever unless Sure. they're curated and conserved in the correct ways.
Yeah, great point. And the other point I'll make here about museums in general, and certainly about our museum here at the Eisenhower Presidential Library, is just that people go through, and I'm sure this is probably true at Fort Riley as well. They go through and they see great exhibits and they see all these wonderful artifacts on display. And what they're seeing is, in our case, about 2% of what we actually have. So the vast majority of artifacts that you see in any museum, I would imagine, are not seen by the public. They're in storage. They're being cared for. They're being preserved, but you just can't possibly display everything you have because there's just not enough space.
That's correct. You're absolutely correct. And what the Army system, the museum system, is doing now is they are placing two locations in the continental United States, one at Anniston and the other at Fort Belvoir outside Washington, where there is a team of conservators there, and who can sort of alleviate that issue for us. As you well know, that's consumes a lot of a museum staff's time in just curating, inventorying, and also doing some conservation on items. And so it's very beneficial that the Army started to think about having these large areas where we could send our artifacts. They still belong to us, to our museum, but they can be curated and conserved and also inventoried for us. It takes care of a lot of man hours.
Yeah, absolutely. We have something similar in the National Archives where we have conservators who work on conserving both paper documents, but also museum artifacts as well. And you're right. I mean, that takes up so much time and so much money. It's so expensive to do proper conservation treatment, and it's a very long, laborious process. It can be very time consuming and very expensive. Excuse me. So it's really important that it be done correctly so those things are preserved forever.
That's correct. You're absolutely correct. So we're always happy, to see the conservators come or shipping something off that needs conservation, because we know we want to be, and as I could speak for you too on this, that we want to be good stewards of the material culture of our history.
Absolutely. Great point. So specific to Kansas then, Bob, is there a place where veterans that live in Kansas can share their stories? I mean, is there a statewide Veterans Oral History Project? Is there a veterans museum of some kind here in Kansas? If veterans feel like they have something to contribute, whether it's an artifact that they'd like to donate or even just their own history that they'd like to share, where can Kansas veterans do that here within the Sunflower State?
Well, within that, I would always recommend and specifically, I dealt with a lot of 1st Infantry Division, veterans. Sure. Send them up to a private organization up in Wheaton, Illinois, the Cantini 1st Division Museum, and it was created by Mr. McCormick, who actually was a newspaper magnate who served in World War I, and he wanted to always show his gratitude for serving in the 1st Infantry Division. And I would always recommend veterans, even World War II veterans, send your reach out to these folks because they have a staff of archivists there willing to accept those items. And we always worked hand in glove with that museum, in that we did not have the staff at that time to take those oral histories, but they would take them, and then we could then it was like a symbiotic relationship. Then we could get those veteran stories, those oral histories, those items back. But I will tell you this, that there was many times when we were on artifacts and oral histories, I would come to work on a Monday and there would be something leaning against my door from a veteran.
Oh,
and
wow.
And I would assure anyone who did that, anonymously, or even, we would reach out to these folks. Yes, thank you. And we would find a suitable home for their items if we could not use them. So we were always very cognizant of the fact of helping folks and also pointing them in the right direction in getting their veterans' histories. But those DD-214s are very important.
Oh yeah, everybody. If you've got a DD-214 out there, make sure it's very well protected. I have one from my own time in the service, and it is locked in a fireproof safe in my house. So I've taken it out many times to make photocopies when I've needed them, but yeah, always put it back in that fireproof safe.
Did you get all the medals Did you get all of your medals?
I have all my medals, yeah, and I have them in a shadow box. I've done that. No, impressive medals in my case, but they're still mine. And so, yeah, I went ahead and put them in a shadow box, and it's hanging on the wall in my little office at home. So, but yeah, great point there, and a great story too about, because I think anybody who works in a museum at some point has had that very experience you just described, where you pull in one morning and you're walking up to the door and there's a box or something sitting there, and what is this? And it's somebody that just, they had something, and for whatever reason they felt like they didn't want to just throw it out. And even if it's something that your museum doesn't need or can't use or whatever, I always, when I've talked to people that have these things that they want to give us, even when we can't take them, I always say, we so appreciate your dedication to historic preservation here, and we can't take it, but and that's why I said earlier, we always at least try to have a couple of places to recommend that maybe they could take it, rather than just pulling up in the middle of the night and leaving it in a box in front of the door. Which is never a good idea, because you then depending on who's coming in first thing in the morning, might have somebody who's, is this something that like a bomb, are we supposed to be worried about? What do we have here? And it actually, you're trying to do a nice thing, and it turns into a kind of a big production. But anyway, I do appreciate that people want to preserve things, and they want to. I'd much rather have somebody call and offer us something and tell them, no, I'm sorry, we can't accept it, than just throw it in the dumpster.
No, don't, definitely not the dumpster. And here's where you do. It reminds me, right after I started as director, I had a gentleman come in, and he said, I cleaned out my father's attic. And he laid on the conference table in my office a 37 millimeter Japanese shell. And we kind of all went, and kind of leaned back, and basically said, thank you. We need to evacuate here for a few minutes. And we called the EOD folks in. They checked it out, and it was demilled. So luckily for us, it was inert. But I think now it actually graces one of our cases here in the museum in our Pacific War, the Army in the Pacific War during the Second World War. And so it was a valuable piece. Yeah. But, you always have experiences like that where you start to sweat a little bit when somebody brings in what you think is live ammunition.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We have here at the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum, we have the largest collection of historic weapons of any presidential library in the entire National Archives system. And same thing. They're all, disarmed. We've taken, there's no firing pins or anything like that, that they are not, even though they're behind glass and they're, nobody can get to them, they're still technically disabled, so that, God forbid anybody could get a hold of them. They can't be used or anything like that. And that's, that's as much for the safety of the public as it is for the safety of the staff that are dealing with these things. But yeah, a piece of ordnance that you're not sure is live or not would probably be a little nerve-wracking. To say the least. Absolutely.
If people knew the behind the scenes for museum folks, they'd
it would make a great reality show, wouldn't it?
Oh, it would.
Not one I want to be on, of course, but I think it would make a very, very interesting show, to say the least. Man, maybe we'll pitch that to one of the networks or something. So, well, Bob, we're coming on towards our time here, but
sure.
Just a couple more quick questions for you. First of all, since you have done so much work with veterans, especially here in Kansas, from your time at Fort Riley, are there any groups of veterans here in Kansas that maybe aren't as well represented in museum exhibits or collections? Women veterans, African American veterans, American Indian veterans, perhaps. Are there groups out there that we need more contributions from, so we get a fuller picture of the American military experience?
Oh, absolutely. Museum directors for many years just zeroed in on the American male.
Sure.
And we have neglected those. One of the things with the design of the new design of the U.S. Cavalry Museum is that we had to look at and specific that I wanted to specifically zero in on, and those are the Native Americans that worked for the United States Army during, and still do, and also the African Americans, especially. We have an exhibit. One of my favorite exhibits is on the 9th and 10th Cavalry, the Buffalo Soldiers,
Sure,
that were out here many, many times. And so we zeroed in on those. We also have an exhibit. When we worked on designing the storyline, we were sitting down one day and we were talking about, we need to inform the public what was at Fort Riley before it was Fort Riley. And we started to look at the Native American tribes that were there, the Osage and the Kiowa and the Pawnee. And we decided to create an exhibit around that. And we called that The Land, the People, and the Horse. And so we wanted to do give a nod to these underrepresented. And I still think, even in my museums, we could even do a better job of representing these different groups. And so we're as yourself, a museum director, there's always something that, I wish I could do this and zero in on this more. And so
absolutely
unfinished business, really.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, you're right. As a director of a museum, there are always, as great as your museum may be, and certainly that's the case here at the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum. There certainly are more stories to tell, and you just never have enough space or enough time or enough money or enough artifacts or oral histories or records to tell all of those stories. So, and that's one thing that's great about museums is, we can continue to evolve and to make a sort of cast a wider net for stories and artifacts and things that can help us tell more of that story.
We always used to laugh. That was what we had, our temporary galleries are for, but that doesn't even fit the is the total, fits the total bill.
Yeah, absolutely. And since you mentioned temporary galleries, I will share with our audience that's listening that if you are listening to this podcast episode anytime still in the year 2025, we here at the Eisenhower Presidential Library have a temporary exhibit up right now in our museum building that is absolutely phenomenal. It's called We the People, Portraits of Veterans in America. It's by an artist named Mary White, who's based in South Carolina. And she spent about 7 years going across the country and meeting veterans and painting a very large, beautiful watercolor portrait of one veteran from every state in the Union. So there are 50 of these hanging up right now in our temporary museum gallery space here at the Eisenhower Presidential Library. That will be up through the end of this calendar year. So through the end of December of 2025. And then at that point, it'll come down and we'll ship the paintings back to Mary White's gallery in South Carolina. But if you haven't seen that yet, I really encourage you to come by and see it. If you're interested, if you're a veteran yourself, if you're interested in military history or the experiences of veterans, it's a really beautiful and moving set of paintings. So if you haven't seen those yet, please come see them sometime before the end of 2025. So, Bob, anything else that you want to tell us about your work or your experiences, in your time working at Fort Riley? Any other things you want to point out about the importance of capturing the stories of veterans? I mean, we all know, World War II, and now, even Korean War veterans are obviously aging and leaving us every day. What should we all be doing right now to try to make sure we're capturing these stories of veterans before they leave us?
We should encourage them to either leave some record of their service at the museum. I would always tell the veterans, please, for us future historians, to keep us in work too. I guess maybe it's a little opportunism there on our part, but please write down your stories. And as I said, I may have told you on Thursday, my father was a World War II veteran, and as a historian, I should have written down his stories before he passed, because it's something I will always, well, both my father-in-law, the stories that we shouldn't lose. We really shouldn't lose. And it's just, I must say, it was working at the museum. It was an incredible experience, and I had opportunities and to practice my craft as a historian. And so I'm very, very fortunate and very appreciative to the United States Army and for allowing me and giving me that opportunity.
Well, Bob, we really appreciate your time today, and thanks for coming on the Club Eisenhower podcast. For those of you that are hearing this, you can also go to our YouTube channel, where we're just at Ike Library on YouTube, and you can also see Dr. Bob Smith there giving us a talk that he did here for us in September of 2025 about some of these same topics, sort of the importance of veterans to history and how veterans can preserve their stories, and some of the really interesting and important stories that he's dealt with in his time as the director, now retired, although still doing quite a bit for the museums at Fort Riley, Kansas. So Bob, thanks so much for your time. Thank you for being a great guest, and thanks for coming on here and sharing a little bit about all of the interesting things you've been able to do in your career.
Thank you, Todd. And if I may say, I'm a historian, I don't shut up, but that temporary exhibit is incredible. Your temporary exhibit on the...
the Mary White. Did you get to go through it when you were here?
Oh, it is. It's very moving, and it's an incredible, incredible experience. So I highly recommend that.
Great. Well, thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. And appreciate the plug for the Mary White exhibit as well. You're right. We've been getting a lot of great comments about it since it went up here around Memorial Day this year. And again, folks, if you're hearing this, that will be open here and available for you to see through the end of calendar year 2025. And after that, it will be taken down and replaced with something else in our temporary exhibit space. Dr. Robert Smith, former director of the Fort Riley Museums here in Kansas. Thanks for your time, and thanks for being on the Club Eisenhower podcast.
Thank you, Todd. It was a pleasure being with you today.
Pleasure having you. Thanks very much. We'll see you next time, everybody, on the Club Eisenhower podcast.